All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about Vue Router. Vue Router is a really effective tool for creating complex single-page applications where content can be switched out or edited or changed on the fly without requiring a full page refresh. And it makes your apps and your pages feel very, very reactive and instantaneous. It absolutely improves user experience quite a bit. Now, normally Vue Router is part of a more complex project structure, a more complex file tree, which we will see a little bit using the Vue command line interface in the next video. But it can be experimented with using a CDN, just like the Vue CDN. Okay, and to find it, so I can incorporate it into my project, I'm going to open up a new window, type in Vue Router, and it takes me to router.vue.js.org. Once I'm here, I can click on Getting Started. Actually, I bet installation has it as well. And I can see the router included in a script right here, which I can copy. So right above it, we see the Vue.js script, and right below it, the Vue Router script. And yes, the installation section of this page contains the link that takes you directly to the CDN as well. So this link would be plugged into the source of a script, and that is the CDN. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that into my project right now. We've got Vue right here. And right beneath that, I'm going to include Vue Router. And we're good to go. Okay, now to use Vue Router, we're going to proceed as normal and set up an element in our HTML. I'm going to give this element the ID of app. And again, this is the element in which all of our Vue code, all of our Vue logic, all of our Vue directives will run. This, the logic of this element will be controlled by our Vue instance. So now that I've created that element, I'm going to create a new Vue instance. I'm going to store it in a variable this time. Just call it route test. Or you can call it app, you can call it anything you want. And inside our Vue instance, I'm going to declare the element, which we always do. Followed by our data property, our data object, which I'm going to keep empty for now. And we can also declare our methods object, but I don't think we're going to be using any methods today, just now. Okay, now that we've done that, we actually need to tell our Vue instance that we're going to be using the router, and that we also want the router to work on this same app element. So to do that, there's two things that we need to do. First, inside our Vue instance, just before we declare the element, we're going to simply create a router property. It's not even a property because, as you can see, it doesn't have a value. But this is something uniquely recognized by Vue as declaring or initializing the router. So once we do that, the very second thing that we need to do is going to be at the end of our router, at our closing parentheses, we're going to write $mount, and inside the following parentheses, we're going to write app. Okay, so these two lines of code together are unique to Vue and Vue Router, and will cause the Vue Router to also apply to this div with the ID of app. Okay, so that gets us completely set up and ready to use both Vue and Vue Router in this div element. This is all that's required. Okay, so we added router, and we added this $mount app. Okay, we're good to go. Now, let's go ahead and put a little content in this div so we have something to look at and something to guide us as we move forward. So I'm going to create an H1 that just says choose a link below. And below this H1, I'm going to create an unordered list. And let's start by simply creating 3 LIs. We'll do 3 links. And the plan here is inside of each of these LIs to include a different link which causes some content below, which we haven't written yet, to change. In fact, for now, let's just create a div, and I'll give this an ID of content. Okay, this is the content that is going to change. The content in this div with the ID of content is going to change based on which LI we click on. Okay, now normally when you're writing a link in HTML, we're used to writing them as anchors. href equals whatever. Link inside, closing a tag. But to use Vue Router, we're going to actually replace all of our anchors with a new element, a new HTML element called router-link. Router-link. And rather than href, our router links are going to have a to attribute. I'm just going to leave the to empty right now, but I'm going to write link 1. I'm going to copy this and paste it inside every other LI and change link 1 to link 2 and link 3. Okay, now I'll explain the to attribute in a moment, but this is what we're looking at right now. A router link, which functions very similarly to an anchor contained inside each LI. And when you click on one of these router links, it will change the content of this div down here. I'm going to save, load my page. Okay, and this is what we have so far. Nothing special, but it's getting there. So now what we need to do is actually determine what content is going to show when one clicks on any one of these links. So let's go back into our JavaScript and start defining some paths for these router links. Now, because we're dealing with link 1, link 2, and link 3, we can keep it pretty simple. And actually, before we declare our Vue instance, I'm going to do it up top. We can declare variables like 1. In fact, since these aren't going to change, let's make them constants. Constant 1, for example, is going to be the path for link 1, right? I'm going to keep this lowercase. And what this is going to be is an object. And this object is going to have currently one property. And that one property is going to be template, which is going to take a string. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this for 2 and for 3. And inside each of these templates, this is where we're going to write the HTML, the full HTML markup that is going to render when the router link that navigates to this path, I'll explain that in a moment, is clicked on. Okay, so I'm just going to put an H1 in here that says 1, and the same for the others, so we can test this out. Okay, so far so good. Now we've actually got the destination of all of our 3 paths, these objects. These objects are what's going to render. So let's actually create our routes. So I'm going to create const router, and that's this router here. Also an object, but this is going to use a constructor function, new Vue Router. Okay, and the object which this creates is going to be plugged into our Vue instance. That's how these are interacting with each other. So this is our new Vue Router, and our new Vue Router is going to contain one property, and that property is going to be routes. And routes is going to contain an array. And this array is going to contain 1, 2, 3 objects. 1, 2, 3. And each of these objects is going to contain two properties: path and component. Now, component is going to be these variables, or these constants. So this first one, I'm just going to tell it, I'm going to refer it to constant 1, or variable 1, if you're not familiar with constants. They function much the same way as variables, but they cannot be changed once they've been declared. So the component for this first object inside of routes, inside of our Vue Router, is going to be 1 up here. And if we wanted, we could actually just plug this whole object with the template property in here. But I'm trying to keep things separate so we can see very plainly and clearly what's going on and how all of these things relate. Okay, so this component is going to have a path of /1 /1, and now I'm going to repeat this for my other two routes, but obviously with 2 and 3. If this doesn't make sense yet, don't worry, we're going to go through it again and we're going to see it in action. 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3. All looks good. Router is plugged into here. So far, so good. Now I'm going to reload my page. And one thing that I forgot is we need to actually plug those paths inside our router links. So if link 1 is going to cause constant 1 to render, then the 2 attribute inside this router link needs to be 1. And the 2 attribute in this one needs to be 2. And in this one it needs to be 3. Okay, that's part 1. But it's still not going to work, and that's because we haven't actually defined where we want all of this content to render. In order to do that, we're going to use yet another new HTML element called router view, which is understood and interpreted by the Vue instance in the Vue Router. Let me just make sure I'm not throwing an error. I am. I misspelled path twice. That'll do it. Okay, so now we see that these router links have actually activated, and they look like links now. They look and behave like anchors. We can style them differently if you want, just like you can with an anchor. But I'm going to click on link 1, and it shows 1 down here. Link 2, link 3, and very reactively, very instantaneously, I can switch between 1, 2, and 3 without the page refreshing and without any perceptible change in layout or reloading of content, nothing like that. It's immediate, it's instantaneous, it's quick. Now, currently all we have in here is an H1. It's pretty boring, but we could put any kind of HTML markup in here we want. So let's make this one a little more complicated. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to get ready to write a multi-line string in here. Multi-line string. So if you ever noticed, if you try to write this is a string and hit the enter key and try to continue your string, the JavaScript engine will not read that correctly because it reads line breaks as the end of a line of code. That doesn't work. So the correct way to write a multi-line string like this is to actually replace your quotation marks with this little thing. It looks like a backwards apostrophe, and it's located directly above the tab key on your keyboard. This will allow me to write a string as many lines long as I want. Okay, so now that I've got a multi-line string ready to go, let's put some real content in here. I'll create a div. I'll close it. And inside this div, I'll create an h3 that says, I've got some illustrations in my image folder, so how about this is an illustration by Brett Bean. I'm going to close my h3, and below here I'll put an image, source equals image / brettbean.png, alt equals an illustration by Brett Bean, and let's give this image, actually that's fine, we'll leave it at that for now. Well, I've got Bootstrap hooked up, so I might as well use some Bootstrap classes. So let's do that. I'll give this div a class of text center, and this image a class of image fluid, and that'll do it. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Reload. Oop, my image isn't loading for some reason. Oh, it's a JPEG. Okay, there's 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you notice, the reason why when I hit reload, it automatically loaded link 1, that's because of this hashtag /1 at the top. So if you are using Vue Router and you want to start from scratch, like from the very first page, you want to make sure that's deleted. Now when I reload, oh, come on. There we go. Now when I reload, it's this router view content area is completely empty because nothing has been loaded yet. Not link 1, not link 2, not link 3. Okay, so let's repeat this. Put a little bit of different content in each of these templates. Put a different image. This will be an illustration by Wiley Beckert. And this last one will be NC Wyeth. Okay, let's reload. Once again, we're at our home page. Click on link 1. This is an illustration by Brett Bean. Link 2, Wiley Beckert. Link 3, NC Wyeth. 3 different batches of content, all of which change out seamlessly and interchangeably, extremely reactive, extremely immediate, great for user experience, and the page never once refreshes or reloads. So it's a very effective way of making your pages and applications much more compelling to use. Okay, now this is some basic ways to use Vue Router and create a really nice single page application. So try taking one of your older websites and thinking about how you could carve it up into a single home page with a router view section, a router view whose content changes based on paths that you click on, just like this. So if this were a real business website, I might have home, services, about, and every time I click on one of these, this would effectively be my nav bar. Every time I click on one, a whole different page would load in the center. We could have a fixed header. And in fact, let's do that. Let me make sure, let me put all of this, our H1 and our UL, inside of a div. I'm going to call it header and give it a class of BG dark, text white. Okay. And let's see. For our UL, ooh. Let's make it into a nav bar real fast. Alright, so we've got basic nav bar up at the top. Content in the center of our page, which changes based on where we have clicked in our nav bar. Let's also give ourselves a footer now. So beneath my router view, beneath my content section, I'll create another div, ID of footer. I'll just put a paragraph. Thanks for visiting my site. I'll give this paragraph a lot of margin. I mean padding. So it gives our footer some size. There's our footer. There's our header. And in between, the content continues to change. Let's make our images smaller so we can see all of this at the same time. Okay, that's better. A little smaller. Alright, I'm going to try to reset the site. Go back to the home page. We've got our header, we've got our footer, nothing in between. Middle content changes, middle content changes, middle content changes. And we effectively have a really reactive and simply laid out, but fully functional one-page website. And it didn't take a whole lot of effort. So that's the magic of Vue Router and how you can take advantage of it. Additionally, the content of these templates can be as complex as you'd like. Okay, so in the next video, I'm going to show you how to make this a little more compelling by actually animating the way in which these routes, these paths, transition into one another. Okay, right now, there's no transition from one to the other. But I'm going to show you very quickly how Vue has a built-in system for animating those transitions. So once again, revisit one of your previous sites or projects and think about how you could lay it out using a system like Vue Router to make it more reactive and more instantaneous, and simply have a better user experience.